In the letter, Mr. Trump's lawyers bend over backwards to describe him in this very specific way. Quote, "Your letter only confirms what is known to everyone. You cannot prove your allegations against the 45th president of the United States." And then they sign it, Bruce Castor and David Schoen, attorneys to the 45th president. Now, it is technically accurate, of course, to call Donald Trump the 45th president, but it's just as accurate to call him the former president. Apparently, though, that is something that can never be said, at least not in front of him. Today, his spokesman for his post-presidential office said on Newsmax TV, quote, "I do not expect the 45th president to be in Washington next week." Oh, you mean the former president? No, that cannot be said. I realize I've been sort of picking at this for a few days now, but it is now going on for long enough, and it is insistently consistent enough that this is worth noticing, in part because Mr. Trump really does appear to be insisting on this, and that could get very weird very quickly. I mean, the very first statement he put out from his 45th president's office at the beginning of the week had this as the headline. The headline said, 45th President Donald J. Trump announces his legal team. The statement was 4 paragraphs long. In those 4 paragraphs, it kept repeating that exact same ungainly phrase. The first line, 45th President Donald J. Trump today announced. Then quotes one of his lawyers saying, "It's an honor to represent the 45th president." And then it quotes the other lawyer saying, "I consider it a privilege to represent the 45th president." It's the same thing in his lawyer's formal written response to the impeachment charges levied against him. Repeatedly and insistently calling him the 45th president, even when it tortures the grammar and makes everything impossible to read and makes the sentences not work. But apparently they have to insistently call him this because they can never call him the former president of the United States. I think it is possible, and I think we should start getting our heads around the prospect that Donald Trump doesn't think of himself as the former president. He is not allowing anybody around him to use that phrase about him. Does that mean he thinks he's still president? He used to call Mar-a-Lago the Southern White House, which was weird for all sorts of reasons, but maybe that's what he thinks it is? In the impeachment response from his lawyers, the lawyers claim that it was not necessarily a false statement. When on January 6th, Trump told the mob that would attack the Capitol that day that he had won the election in a landslide. They are contending in their written defense to the impeachment that that is a false statement. They describe the election results as contested and say it's not necessarily false that he won in a landslide. When he said that, maybe that was true. I think we are underestimating the potential for crazy here. I mean, the Republicans right now are heading into the impeachment trial, which starts at the beginning of next week. And they think that they are mounting a defense against the conviction of Donald Trump on the technical grounds that the Senate shouldn't even be holding an impeachment trial for him because he's not president anymore, because he's a former president. I am here to tell you, dude does not agree that he is a former president. And he is not allowing anyone to describe him that way. If that's the trap door they're going to use to try to get him out of a Senate impeachment conviction, he's going to fight it. He insists he cannot be called a former president. He must be called the 45th president. He's still using the presidential seal. There's no sign that he concedes that there's now a 46th president, and so he's an X. I mean, how many ticks are we away from him claiming that he is still in office, that he still has the powers of the presidency, that he's rightfully still president? I mean, I would love to hear him cross-examined on this subject. In a Senate trial, say, perhaps by lead impeachment manager and distinguished constitutional law professor Jamie Raskin. I would pay good money to see that. But Mr. Trump's lawyers today said no. They said no, the 45th president will not testify in Washington next week. Heads up that there's no reason they couldn't subpoena Trump to testify. I mean, on his behalf, his lawyers are denying factual claims in the charge against him. Somebody should have to back up those disputations of fact under oath. We shall see. Honestly, I think if you asked Mr. Trump directly, he would love to testify. Nobody listens to him anymore. He has no outlet. He doesn't have a social media platform. He doesn't have anybody meeting with him. He doesn't have anybody taking his calls as far as we can tell. I mean, he insists that he hasn't really left office and he's not a former president, and nobody's listening to him. And the Democratic House impeachment managers are now demanding that he come to Washington and explain the events of January 6th. Don't you think he's desperate to do that? Oh, please let the man speak under oath. Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.